Hey Tony, what's up? Guys, yesterday I got two calls from two completely different people and I wanted to compare these two calls, okay? So one guy calls me saying like, Arun, I want to learn Oracle and I want to go for 18C, 19C version. So which one would you suggest? I was completely surprised that he was not at all agreeing to go for Oracle 12C version. And the other call I got from one of the remote DBA support client, and they told me like they are currently upgrading their databases from 11G to 12C. Now can you see currently in the market still there are people who are using 12C databases, and there is this guy who was telling that he wants to learn Oracle database administration on 19C. Surprised? Fact? Yes, no, maybe. I think it's student's choice. Any which ways, what do you say, Tony? Shall we start the show? Yeah. Alright guys, both of us will see you on the other side. Welcome back guys, Arun this side, and I'm here with the next episode of Daily DBA Show. I personally hope you all are enjoying this show, and trust me guys, I really value each and every single email that I have got, but personally I would like to also apologize for the people whom I was not able to answer their questions, because I just got a flood of emails, but I try to answer as many emails as possible and try to give you as many important links as possible. So what I did is, just in case to keep the emails short, because I want to give more value and answers to all the emails, what I did is, for most of the emails, I actually directed them to an already published YouTube video, or I directed them to an already published support article. And that's how I'm trying to kind of like balance and respond to as many people as possible. That being said, once again, in case if you have any questions, and feel free to send those questions to support@dbagenesis.com. I would personally love to answer all your queries. And today, let's start our show with the first question of the day. In what scenario we should go for RMAN cumulative backup over RMAN differential backup? It's a pretty simple and straightforward question when you look at cumulative backups and differential backups. I believe like if you guys already know the difference between the cumulative backups and differential backups, so you should go for cumulative backups only when recovery time is important, and you should go for differential backup when the disk space is important. Now let me share my idea on which one I would prefer. Before I even give my comments on which one I would prefer, let me tell you this. In my entire career, I have seen clients who have gone for the cumulative backups, but they never performed even SP file recovery. Understand this, how much disk space they might have wasted. Because see, I mentioned cumulative backups you should go only when recovery time is important. That means it has a star. It means it will take big disk space compared to differential backups. Now when it comes to differential backups, that means disk space is important to you and you are ready to compromise on the database recovery time. Now that being said, I think you guys can judge, like if I personally want to design a backup strategy for any client, I would blindly go with differential backups because that's what I recommend. Any which ways, I have never seen clients who have used the cumulative backups and were able to save a great deal of time in terms of recovery. But on theoretical aspects, yes, you should go for cumulative backups when your recovery time is important. Like you want a shorter time of recovery of the database, or the fastest time in order to recover the database. But you should go for differential backup when disk space is important to you and you are okay to compromise on the recovery time. Like the database recovery might take longer than your cumulative backups when compared. I hope that helps, and let's move on to the next question. Hi Arun, could you please share some details on capacity planning for database? Starting from the very basic, like what should be my ideal SGA, PGA for a single node database that I want to implement for an application in production environment, which would cater 2000 plus transactions per day for online airline ticketing purchase. Amazing. I actually like these kind of questions where we talk about a real world problem. See, I mean, there is no direct thumb rule that you can count the exact memory allocations for a database with the number of connections you have in hand and what will be the XYZ transaction numbers. It's really hard to tell those details because sometimes the kind of operations that users will be performing inside the database, that also changes the dynamics of the database instance. So it's not about the number of instances, it's mostly about what type of transactions will be going inside the database. Of course, the user connections is also important, but it comes in the priority list little lower. But the most important point that comes in defining the database instance size would be the transactions that will be going inside the database. Now, that being said, there is no direct formula with Oracle that you can use and right away tell that, okay, this is the size that you have to use for your database instance. Let me tell you this, DBA Genesis has a lot of remote DBA support clients, and we support clients across the globe. Whenever we get a client who has a new application deployment with the database, what we do is we go with generic idea of like, let's start the database instance with, probably in your case, I would go with probably around 18 or 20 GB database instance, and then kind of like increase or decrease based on the database performance. So there is no constant formula that you can just fit in the details and you get the exact amount of memory in Oracle. It does not work like that. So the best way or the best idea that I can give you is start with a random number. Now that if you talk to the experts in my team or the database architects, because of their experience, they can actually give you a pretty good number in terms of database instance. And in case if you are just starting up with the deployment of databases, then I would suggest start with any number that is comfortable to you. Check with the amount of RAM that is available on the server. Start with some number and then try to increase and decrease based on checking the database performance reports. Check the SGA usage, check the PGA usage, check the memory utilization, check the AWR report, and then you decide whether you want to increase the memory or decrease the memory. All in all, there is no one formula that fits any kind of scenario. Same database with same number of users in two different client locations will have different instance sizes. Now it varies. Sometimes it also varies because it is the requirement of the application. So you just can't tell that what exactly is a number to right away assign to any Oracle database. Let's move on. The next question we have is, what is the use of password file in database, and is password file mandatory to create a database? So even before I give you the exact answer to the question, let us talk about a simple scenario. You have a database. Let's take the database SID is ProdDB, and that database is hosted on a different server. Now I'm using my system to connect to that server using Oracle client, and I type SQL plus sys at ProdDB, okay, as sysdba. Now understand, on the server the database is down, the listener is up and running. So when I hit enter on my system on the Oracle client, definitely the Oracle client will ask password, right? So I have to give the sys user password. Now you tell me these details go to the server where listener is up and running, but the database is not running. So where do you think the listener will authenticate that you are really the sys user and you are authorized to start up the database from a client connection, right? In these kind of scenarios, you need password file. So what password file does is it stores passwords for the sys user and also the sysdba role users. So whichever users you have in the database who have been granted as sysdba role, those all users' password will be available in the password file. Now when you try to connect to the database server from a client connection, and if the database is down, definitely you would want to start it up, right? So even before you start the database, how would the Oracle know that you are the correct sys user who has given the correct password. So you need an authentication that is outside the database, because when database is down, how would listener authenticate that you are the right user to start the database, right? So for this scenario, we have the password file. This is one part. Now let us talk about the other part. When you try to clone a database using RMAN, in that case, you also have to transfer the password file from the source server to the target server, right? Now, why it is done? Because when you connect with RMAN to the target database, that is the one that you want to clone. And when you connect to the auxiliary database where you want to create the clone, we need an authentication, a reverse authentication saying that this RMAN is authorized to connect to this database instance. So for that authorization, what we do is we take the source server or the target server password file, we put it over there, and when you connect with the sys user in the RMAN onto the auxiliary instance, that password file is used in order for you to authenticate and perform the cloning. All in all, to create a database, it's not mandatory to have a password file. Even if you don't maintain a password file, it's perfectly okay. But when you go for a remote authentication of sys user, and if you want to start the database remotely using a client or from a different server, you need a password file. And also when you want to perform a database cloning using RMAN, you would definitely need the password file. So all in all, yes, it is required, but not for creating the database. So of course, when you create the database using DBCA, you get the password file by default. But if you are creating it manually, it's not 100% required that it should be available on the disk. That being said, let's move on. So the next question we have is how many data files a table space can have. So guys, for everyone who's listening to this show, I would like to give you a very small challenge, because I don't want to right away give the answer to this question. What I want you to do is go to support.dbgenesis.com and in the search bar type physical Oracle database limits. Check that article, and trust me guys, I have put up great deal of content over there when it comes to what type of block size you can have inside the database, how many table spaces you can have inside the database, how many data files you can assign to a table space, and whatnot. I think more than just the data files in a table space, you should also know the other details around the block size, what is the max database size you can have, what is the max table space size you can have, what is the max big data file size you can have inside the database, and whatnot. So once again, go to support.dbgenesis.com and in the search bar type physical Oracle database limits. Read that article, and I think you all will have great deal of content. Moving on, the next question we have is, why won't we try, drop and recreate index instead of rebuilding the index? Interesting one. I guess if you are not familiar, like why do we rebuild the indexes? Now this is more important. What happens is, over a period of having a lot of DML updates on your table, a lot of insert updates and deletes, what happens is the indexes become invalid. Now to make them valid, you need to rebuild the indexes. When you rebuild the indexes, understand, you tell me which one would be quicker. Do you just rebuild the index, and what it will do is whatever invalid entries that we have inside the index, it will map it to the exact entries inside the table? Or do you want to drop the index and recreate it from scratch? At any given point of time, definitely rebuilding index would be cheaper when compared to recreating the index on a table. So what you are saying is you want to delete the entire index, you want to recreate the index. Understand, there are three main objects inside the database that take space. One is tables, one is indexes, and also materialized views. Assume this. So what you are saying is you want to drop an index, that means it will delete the entire index, that means store data inside the database. And you want to recreate the index, that means again inserts will happen inside that index, because index also occupies space. That way you are wasting a lot of system resources when compared to rebuilding the indexes. So rebuilding indexes at any given point of time is much cheaper when compared to the recreating of the indexes. One more important point, just in case if this question is coming from a fresher DBA, I'll tell you what. If you are comparing the database performance when it comes to a very small table or probably a fresh installation of Oracle database in your test virtual machine, you cannot actually test the performance of dropping and recreating the index or rebuilding the index. You might say that, okay, the first one is cheaper, but that doesn't work when it comes to scaled data or pretty big tables. So when you have tables of terabyte size, that point of time you can't just drop and recreate the index, because that will cost a lot of system resources, and trust me, it's not good in real time. So that's why if you look at all the real-time environments, they will have index rebuilding scripts scheduled on somewhere around Saturday midnight or Sunday midnight, so that it takes its own sweet time in order to rebuild the indexes. And they do not build all the indexes inside the table. The heavily used tables where there are a lot of DML operations, it's good idea to rebuild the indexes again and again. I guess a weekly activity on rebuilding the indexes is more than enough, but some environments where they need more high performance, and if they can get some free time during the week, that point of time they can also rebuild the indexes, including the weekend times. All in all, dropping and recreating index will be taxing on Oracle database. It's not advisable, but it's a good idea to rebuild the indexes when compared to dropping and recreating. I hope that helps, and let's move on. The next question we have is, can we have instance and database name different? How can we do it? I believe, like I mentioned this in my previous episode, that you can have a different instance name, different database name, and I guess because of that answer I gave in the previous episode, I think someone put down this question. Yes, you can have a different instance name. You can just type alter system set instance name equal to and give the new instance name and specify scope equal to SP file parameter, because it's not a dynamic parameter. You need to bounce the instance, and once you bounce the instance, definitely you will get the new instance name. Now, one more thing, if you just want to change the instance name, don't want to change the database ID, then this is the command you will have to use: alter system set instance name equal to the new instance name. But if you want to change both the database instance name and the database name, then you will have to use dbNewID tool, which is a tool provided by Oracle, and that tool will help you change the database SID. Now guys, for everyone who's listening to this episode, I have a quick assignment for all of you. Do one thing. Based on what I just said, I have a question for everyone. Tell me this thing: if you change the database instance name and the database name is different, so in your environment variables, what will you set the Oracle SID? Will it be the database instance name, or will it still remain the same as database name? I want everyone to put your answers in the comments, and let's see how many of you are expert DBAs and how many of you get the right answers. Alright guys, so I have this very important question which I have chosen as the bonus question of the day, and let me read it out. So it says, please suggest which cloud platform I can choose to learn and suggest clients to migrate, and which one is booming currently. I think amazing question. Like, before even you decide to learn cloud, I guess you need to first start off with trying to learn to migrate databases to cloud. So I would give you some assignment, like, why don't you try to migrate a small database which you host on a virtual machine to AWS cloud, and you try to perform this migration. And while you perform this migration, it can be a downtime migration where you take downtime on your virtual machine and then you migrate the database onto the cloud. And the next level of assignment, that what you can try is to perform a zero downtime database migration from physical to cloud, where you might be using tools like Golden Gate and DataGuard. And by the way, just to let you know guys, because of these kind of questions that I've been getting from so many years, not technically years, at least from last 2 years, What we did is, like a couple of months back, we introduced real-time projects on our website. So if you go and check the real-time projects, we also have a database migration real-time project where you actually work with me to help DBA Genesis clients migrate their databases to cloud. That being said, now coming to the second part of the question, like which cloud to suggest to your clients, see, it all depends. Like if the database size is small, I would personally choose the AWS. If the database size is big, I would choose and go for IBM Cloud. And if it is Microsoft SQL Server or any other different type of database apart from Oracle, I would try to go for Microsoft Azure. I think there is no fixed agenda that I can tell you like, okay, for this client, you should go for this cloud. All in all, suggesting the cloud to a client completely depends on the requirement, size of the database, what is the network bandwidth, what will be the usage of the database, where the application is hosted, what is the distance between the application data center and the database data center. It all depends. What type of storage your cloud vendor is providing in terms of database. Do you need to host database on a physical server or a bare metal server? Now, if you want to go for a bare metal server, definitely you won't get it in AWS. Actually, they introduced it recently. But if you want to go for a bare metal server, you will have to choose IBM Cloud or probably some other different cloud vendor. Again, as I mentioned, depending on the client's requirement and what will be the usage of their application, along with the distance between the data centers, it depends which cloud might suit them. Sometimes it's not important that you have to suggest a cloud that is running in the market right now, because it doesn't work like that. Sometimes it's also better to go for the cloud where the application is hosted. And it's a good idea, like if application is hosted on AWS and if your database is also hosted on AWS, make sure you're choosing the same data center. Not really, the data centers are pretty far, otherwise the application travel time will be high. That being said, coming to the last part of the question where you asked about which cloud is booming, I'm not sure if you're asking in terms of which one is making more money, because see, if you talk about money, of course AWS is leading the market, but if you talk about the usability, I am personally fan of IBM Cloud. I don't know why. I have already worked on Google Cloud, I have worked on Microsoft Azure, I have worked on Oracle Cloud also, and I have worked on AWS. But personally, I love IBM Cloud. I really don't know why, but of course, we had some bad experiences with the other cloud vendors, and that's the reason why I stick to IBM Cloud. Like all the students who purchase remote cloud labs from DBA Genesis to practice Oracle database or any other stuff on our own cloud machines, now those cloud machines are all hosted on IBM Cloud. I do not go with any other cloud. So for clients, I do not recommend IBM Cloud. I would like to reiterate again, it's not about what I like or what suits your organization. It's all about what is the requirement, where is the application hosted, and what are client budgets. Because sometimes when you work with cloud, definitely budgets also come into picture, and that becomes a constraint for most of the clients. Alright guys, that's all for today. I had these amazing questions, and as I always mention, please don't forget to put your doubts, comments, confusion about database in the comments below. I would definitely try to answer as many questions as possible. And in case if you're listening this on a podcast, then don't forget to send your questions to support@dbagenesis.com. I hope you enjoyed this show, and I will see you in the next show. Bye-bye.